Hey, it's Brian from IGN, and I'm here with the Safdie brothers and Robert Pattinson, directors and star of the awesome new film, Good Time. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
For clarity, this is the Safdie.
Yeah, there we go. And I'm not in the movie, I'm not none of those people. This movie is one of the most sort of energetic and visceral things I've ever seen. I had a very tough time sort of quantifying it even by genre. I loved it, suffice to say. So how did this whole project come together? How long have you guys been working on this thing?
You know, you could argue that this type of project had been in the works since I was a kid and, you know, getting into mischief with you know, fellow friends and, you know, running from cops at 11 years old. But it really didn't begin until, you know, this guy reached out to us while we were on like the dawn of the premiere of our previous movie. A small film that we made about, you know, the homeless junkie scene in New York, and he's just basically in a very Connie, he plays the character Connie, in a very Connie-like fashion. He like said, I don't know why, but I saw this image on the internet and I feel some weird innate connection to it, and therefore I feel an innate connection to you, therefore I think that we need to be doing something together. And there was like a weird spirituality there, with also like insane obsessive conviction. And yeah, I was just like, you know, I was reading some books about, you know, about prisoners and ex-cons, and I just downloaded every episode of the show Cops, the greatest American TV show.
Right.
And so I was very much in that world. And one of the actors in the movie was actually in prison, and he was keeping these journals that I was asking him to keep. And so there was just a lot of stuff floating around. And you know, we wanted to make a piece of pulp. We wanted to make like a genre movie that just kind of was like a shot to the arm. And yeah, he basically sparked the whole process.
Nice work. How did you find this character? Because I mean, I grew up in and around New York City. I'm from New Jersey. I went to New York City for school. He is so triumphantly New York. I mean, there's something incredibly New York about this movie, right down to like the crusty South Pole jackets and stuff like that. It just kind of pops out.
Fake South Pole.
Yeah, really. But I mean, people have been describing your character in this movie as transformative, and to me, it was like, it really resonated as somebody. I was like, I grew up around people like this guy. So how do you channel someone like that? I mean, you grew up so far from that world.
I mean, it feels really alien to me as well. I mean, it's kind of, especially I think the more colloquial New York you get, like, because it's funny, everyone says it's such a New York movie, but it kind of feels like, I don't know, like I watch it and it feels like a sci-fi movie or something. It doesn't even really look like the New York I know anyway, which is kind of maybe 8 blocks downtown.
Right. The same 8 blocks they put in every movie.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's like mostly about like Queens, right? Which is like when people come to New York City, no one's ever like, oh, we're going on vacation to Queens.
Yeah. Well, I always like seeing, there's a couple of hotels that are really iconic in Queens. That's where I would like to go on vacation from New York. You know?
Remember I sent you the image of the Paris hotel off of Grand Central?
We're gonna do a night with Nick and Connie there.
Yeah, it's like a romantic spot. It's basically a place you get hookers, but it's like themed, romantically themed. So I thought it would be great for the two brothers.
It's always good when they add a little romance to that old art. I think what I really liked about this movie, and it's you almost feel guilty about saying this, but you're watching this almost disaster unfold, and it's kind of awesome. Like you're like, I feel bad, but it's sort of quantified as like when you're having just the worst day of your life, and you get to that point where you're like, this is so bad it's actually comical. Like I have to laugh at how much worse, like the universe is on me right now, and I have to laugh at this because if I get upset about this, I lose.
Totally.
Well, it's funny. It's like one of those side-scrolling games.
Yes.
You can't go back. You know, you're constantly moving forward, and it's like, oh, fuck, you try and go back against screen, and you're done. You know.
That's such a good. I was actually describing it sort of as like a Rube Goldberg machine, in the same way I see a movie like The Goonies, right, where like they start on the bicycles, they go down the hill, and then everything gets horrible or great, depending on which character you are. But this movie has that sort.
If they didn't go down that hill, there'd be no movie.
That's it. Well, I think Mikey would move or whatever. They lose. They never get the treasure, and they never get pizza on the beach with the sloth. Great film. Go check it out. So yeah, there's something really like energetic about that movement to it, where everything that Connie interacts with almost gets worse Like he's just this kind of Tasmanian devil, destructive force.
It's brown-thumbed. So the opposite of green thumb.
Right.
Where everything you touch turns to...
Yeah, you try to raise a plant. And like there's moments where you're like, oh, he is tender and he's caring. Like, but his interactions seem to just be toxic towards almost everything.
Yeah. And he's not really aware of it as well. He's completely unaware of the destruction he brings into everyone's life.
Yeah, because I think he kind of feels like I'm doing the right thing. My motivations are the only focus he's like got blinders on.
Yeah.
Well, in the moment you're always doing the right thing for what you've just created.
Because he's like, well, it's the right thing for me, so it's the right thing.
Connie's a deep guy.
Yeah.
He's deep. Like there was like one of the inspirations was this legendary criminal named Gary Gilmore. And when I was reading the book and like watching interviews with him, he would always talk about reincarnation and like he once tried to convince this girl that he was seeing that he was actually the devil himself and that was why they needed to hang out. And there was just like, there's this idea, like I know personally when I meet somebody, if they're super self-serious, it's either like unbelievably annoying or unbelievably attractive.
Right.
And like it became, Connie's like this super self-serious guy who's obsessed with his purpose. And his purpose is like living free and with his brother. He's like kind of, it's what's interesting is the movie takes place in New York, but he's like the opposite of coastal elitism.
Yeah.
Like the opposite of it. And like, I think that like, I don't know, I think that's what I'm attracted, why I'm attracted. Like I know a lot of people like Connie. Well, and sometimes he would come up to me and he'd be like, how would you say this? And I was like, well, it's not, you're not playing me. But he's like, no, Benny's your brother, and you know, and like, you know, I just want to hear how you'd say this line, and you know, I don't know, I'm not a very self-serious person.
I think what you were saying something interesting the other day, where it was like Connie believes that he's created all these weird kind of theories. Like he's the only person who ever thought to rob a bank and go live in the woods in paradise. And like this is the only person who ever thought of it. I've got this great idea. But it's like you turn on any movie and that's
the crux.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is so foreign to just a dude in a South Pole jacket in Queens.
Yeah.
Right? Like that is just a completely different, like the bank robber universe and everything like that. And so like to describe this movie to people, I was like, I mean, it's about a bank robbery, but it's not. Like there are movies that are about a bank robbery where that's the movie.
Yeah.
And this, yeah, exactly. So I mean, were there influences from like other films that you guys had growing up that were sort of that you brought pieces of into this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like
Running Man.
Running Man is weirdly always that was like that. Running Man, like The Shining, Kramer versus Kramer, and like Clockwork Orange were like our mainstays as kids. It's just
the only tapes that were there.
Yeah.
This odd selection of tapes.
But like 48 movies, like 40, just movies where you see people who are kind of forced to be with one another. You know, especially in this day and age where everyone's so isolated, to like see people forced to interact with one another is always entertaining. So like, you know, 48 Hours, Midnight Run to some degree, After Hours, you know, the Scorsese movie. Scorsese's like ultimate god. So, you know, a lot of his movies, you know, like probably some lesser known movies. There's this documentary that HBO made when HBO used to be like all about grit. This movie called 1 Year in a Life of Crime, where literally this documentarian just hung out with these like Newark criminals as they like went and shoplifted, and just like they were like these local heroes. They were like everywhere they went, they like knew someone, and I don't know, there was elements of that, and obviously like the Executioner song too, a TV movie.
Right.
I don't know, we pull from real life just as much as movies.
But it comes to like kind of this mush of just stuff. There's not like one thing that's referential in the movie.
Sure.
Because it just becomes a part of the vocabulary. You know, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's in there, and you don't even realize that you're kind of pulling on certain things.
Our production designer would always mention, he would always pull from GTA. He'd be like, oh, like this movie is like, if you follow the narrative for a little bit of GTA, and then you're like, you know what, I just want to get 5 stars and have the army after me. Like that's what he would always like in the movie.
That's such a great way of putting it too, because it's like I'm thinking of specific moments in the film. I don't want to spoil because I really want you to see this movie where I could see the stars popping up. And very specifically by the end, it's like, no, this dude has like 5 or 6 stars. And like the thing is with GTA is you do have that, like when you get caught and the camera pulls out and then you wake up at a random police station or outside of a hospital and you're like, where the in the city am I? And it spins around. It kind of really has that kind of like, I didn't know where these characters were, and when they started returning to specific areas in the movie, it did feel like backtracking in a video game mission to collect something that you hadn't before.
Totally.
Which is a really fun and terrifying way to think of that film.
Definitely. I mean, the movie's very much like Alice in Wonderland too in that regard. It's like he goes in basically by taking his brother out of social services. His brother's developmentally disabled, and he basically is trying to like teach him that he can be independent. He's like, no, you can be independent, you can be free. I'm going to teach you that you can be on your own by, you know, the idea is good, the execution is maybe not so great, like taking him to rob a bank with him. But when they go and rob that bank, that's like going down into the rabbit hole. And then as you keep going down, things get weirder, the lighting starts to get stranger, you know, the characters start to get more extreme, and like, you know, the actions become like insane.
Now, Robert, when you were working on this movie, would you ever feel like physically endangered? Like it's almost sort of like slapstick, a lot of the stuff that you're doing. Like there's clanging wheelchairs around, jumping over barbed wire fences. Like, did you get hurt?
I don't think I got hurt. I felt more in danger just legally. And still do.
You feel like, oh, are we breaking a law?
Yeah, when it comes out, I'm sure there will be some kind of surprise lawsuit.
like accidental trespassing or something? Or purposeful?
Many things.
There's a couple of federal laws that maybe were broken.
I think those ones which we almost knew we were breaking them. No, not really.
Well, I mean, I think that, like, I was going to say, if you film a crime and put it in a movie, it doesn't count. That's absolutely not true.
That's like that.
It's the fourth wall law.
Actually, weirdly, our producer just bought a new camera. This was like 8 years ago, and filmed the most insane brawl near his house. And like the cop showed up and like, hey, that's a nice camera. He's like, I filmed the entire thing. And he was like, his
star witness.
They couldn't believe it. They're like, what are you, a filmmaker? He goes, yeah, actually I am. He filmed it incredibly. He got close-ups of every single person's face. And literally these people were standing testimony. They were looking at Oscar, our producer, like, kill you.
Yeah.
Like, you got literally the most incriminating piece of footage you've ever. Well, our movie doesn't do that.
Everybody films, like, you know, Black Friday brawls with like vertical mode.
Yeah. World Star, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think we do need more filmmakers out there just really shooting the raw gritty that's going on in the world. So this movie, what I really enjoy is it kind of felt like watching like 6 minutes into like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, where you're like, this guy has almost tried, he's exhausted every single opportunity. And so how do you sort of write a character that becomes that desperate? Like, I mean, are you reaching into, you said there's people you know, but it almost gets to a point where you're like, there's no one that would make the decisions that you're making by the end of this movie.
I mean, I did really obsessive things developing the character for Rob, and he was on set doing Lost City of Z, and I was calling him from like, he barely had any reception, and I was sending him these insane character developments, like literally minute one, like what happens when Connie's born, and leading all the way up to like minute one of the movie. And what it does do is you like really establish like a life that you want to break free from. So like you establish like the stakes of like, if you don't succeed at what you're trying to do, you know what you're gonna fall back onto, and that, you know, that I think that, you know, through osmosis, the audience definitely feels that, like, geez, this guy just is trying to break free.
And there's a logic that he has. It's flawed, but
yeah,
there's a logic there. So if he makes a mistake, he's gonna try and fix it. So he just keeps making mistakes.
He's technically like painting by the numbers.
Yes.
They're just the wrong numbers.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, I'm gonna put this here. It's like, okay, great. But then everything gets erased almost from before. So it's like, okay, this is the new mistake that I gotta fix, and now I'm gonna go and do this. And so that's he's not really looking far ahead enough to realize how far he's been, you know, or
I think also, I'm sorry, I was interrupted.
Yeah, no, please.
I just suddenly realized as well, because
you need to shut him up.
I think that it's why it feels so out of control as well. It's because you're so unclear as an audience as to what the purpose of it all is.
Right.
And it's literally, you're just going, the accelerator is just stuck, and you're like, and there's a kind of vague mention of Virginia and blah, but literally, like, you've hit a dead end within 30 seconds of the movie, or within 4 minutes. It's like, oh, well, there's nowhere left to go. And then, I mean, you're suddenly being, you know, they have almost a reverse drive. Like you're just stuck on the front of a train, and you have no idea where it's taking you.
But there's that notion of like sunken cost fallacy, right? Which is like someone who put like 5 years into a law degree and be like, I got to do 2 more, and it's like, or you could stop, and then gain the, you know, you only lose 5 instead of 7.
way.
There was a guy, we did this walking tour with this character who we met. We hung out with my friends up in Yonkers, and then in that hangout session, we found out that there was this guy who was very similar to Connie, and we ended up doing this walking tour, the 3 of us with my friend Brian, where we basically retraced the steps of his recently deceased brother's, like, kind of weird, completely unsolved, unknown crime, where he like hid out in a building that
He lived in a hole.
Lived in a hole. Literally lived in a hole.
What?
He lived in a hole.
He lived in a cave. His brother brought him. He worked at a car shop, so he would bring him car batteries to like power his house in the cave.
He lived,
It was insane.
he lived in a hole outside of someone's house and then sneaked into the house to be with the daughter. It's so crazy.
What?
It was one of the craziest things I've ever heard.
But then it got. Remember the story got even
Connie
crazier.
would definitely live in a hole. That's such a great character trait. Right,
Is that, you end up quadrupling down on your own stubbornness at the point where you're like, no, I have to be right. There's no other way than this.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember how crazy how like that idea of doubling down. Remember that story that when he hid out in that house and then he had that confrontation with the guy and then kind of shot him and then thought he might have been dead but he was totally alive. He's like, well, now I have to bury him. So he buried him, but he only buried him in like 18 inches
Right.
a hole. So the guy dug himself out and was like walking down the street with like a bullet hole covered in dirt.
Which is like you made a zombie, basically.
Yeah.
It was the most incredible story ever. We were like, it was a different movie, but it was totally like inspiring for the character because you're like, man, this guy.
I think you guys should make that one next. That sounds phenomenal.
It's definitely like takes scum and like, amplifies it.
It's also it's just what you were saying from the beginning as well. If you take pretty much anyone you ever meet, every single person you meet has these insane stories, and especially when you go in the minutiae, the detail of the story, everyone seems like they're completely insane. and every single person has one of these stories. And it's kind of, I think this, it's just zoomed in on completely like in a way of like fly over people. And I think everyone seems fascinating once you go like close enough.
Yeah, and it really is an absolute joy and a thrill to watch, even if you kind of feel bad looking into these characters' lives.
Well, it's Schadenfreude, everyone likes.
That's exactly it. Yeah. That's exactly. I went to text my friend that the other day, and I'm like, iPhone's got to come through right now.
Yeah, you want to
really just take over and help.
SCD.
Yeah,
it's like, come on.
I love how much we depend on the Sometimes I'll just randomly hit the tech number.
And just hope for the best.
Like, oh yeah, there it is.
Yep. Well, anyway, Good Time is out August 11th.
Yep.
That's
New York,
right.
LA.
Yeah. So go check that out. Find it. I really, really love this movie, and thank you guys so much for making it because it's a blast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for watching my interview with Robert Pattinson. If you like that, you'll love our interview with Anthony Ingruber, the voice of the Joker in Telltale's Batman. And after that, here's 5 indie movies that you should watch because we love them and you might too.